Hey guys, tonight we're starting with something you probably didn't expect. A spiritual alarm clock that doesn't have a snooze button. Forget your cozy blankets and your overpriced lavender-scented pillow spray, because in the world of early discipleship, sleep is basically optional. You think dragging yourself out of bed for a 7 a.m. class or a Monday meeting is hard? Try waking up in the dusty wilderness with 12 other exhausted men. No coffee. And Jesus telling you the kingdom of heaven is near, which is Bible speak for, stand up, it's time to walk another 20 miles. Your bed is either the cold ground, a borrowed mat that smells like sheep, or, if you're really unlucky, just your own cloak that's been doubling as a sweat rag for the last week. No mattresses, no blankets washed in baby soft detergent, no soothing Spotify playlist. Instead, you're serenaded awake by roosters that crow with the exact energy of your worst enemy cheering on your misery. Oh, and let's not forget the bugs, mosquitoes, fleas, and random crawling things that look like they escaped from a nightmare. Congratulations. Your first morning thought is not gratitude. It's, why am I still alive? And then comes the group wake-up call. Jesus doesn't exactly say, rise and shine, in a sweet mom voice. No, it's more like, the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few, which sounds poetic until you realize it means you are the worker, and the harvest is not bread. It's endless labor, barefoot hikes, and listening to parables before your brain has even processed what day it is. Privacy? Forget it. You're sleeping shoulder to shoulder with other disciples, some of whom snore like demons, and at least one who insists on talking about the dream he had, where bread turned into fish. Spoiler alert, it wasn't prophetic. It was just weird. Now, let's talk about morning hygiene or the complete lack of it. There's no bathroom tent, no fresh toothbrush waiting on a sink, no peppermint-flavored toothpaste. If you want fresh breath, you're chewing on a random twig and hoping it doesn't break your molar. Your tunic smells like yesterday's sweat mixed with borrowed donkey air, and your hair is basically its own ecosystem. Forget showers. The closest thing you'll get to a morning cleanse is maybe splashing questionable water on your face while praying. It doesn't give you some ancient parasite that makes you see visions even Jesus didn't predict. Breakfast? Don't even dream about pancakes. Don't even whisper the word coffee. The disciples' breakfast is bread so dry it could break a tooth. Maybe dipped in olive oil if you're lucky, or washed down with lukewarm water that tastes like clay. You're not eating for pleasure, you're eating to not faint on the road. And while you choke down your crust, Jesus is already preaching about how man shall not live by bread alone, which is inspiring, sure. But right now, you're living on bread alone and wishing for anything else. So, as the sun rises over Galilee, your day begins not with a gentle stretch or a positive affirmation, but with sand in your sandals, sleep in your eyes, and a voice reminding you that following Jesus is not a part-time gig. It's full-time, all the time, no days off, and definitely no breakfast buffet. Welcome to your morning, sinner. You're officially awake, whether you like it or not. So, you've managed to pry your eyes open, stretch your aching limbs, and pretend that the rooster isn't laughing at your pain. Congratulations, you're alive, though barely. Now comes the part of the morning that should bring comfort, joy, maybe even a sliver of happiness breakfast. Except here's the bad news. This isn't IHOP, it isn't Starbucks, and it isn't even your grandma's leftovers. This is first century Palestine, and your menu looks like it was curated by someone who hates you personally. The disciples gather in a circle, passing around the holy prize, bread, and not the soft, fluffy, bakery, fresh kind with golden crusts and warm steam rising from inside. No, this is hard, flat, crumbly bread that tastes like it's been reincarnated from yesterday's bread, and the day before that, and probably last week too. It's basically edible drywall. You don't slice it, you gnaw at it. You don't savor it, you endure it. And every bite you take is a gamble between filling your stomach or chipping a tooth. If you're really lucky, maybe someone caught a fish. Sounds exciting, right? Except the fish is tiny, bony, and smells like it crawled out of the Dead Sea just to spite you. It's not grilled, not seasoned, not even served with lemon because lemons, like happiness, aren't in your life anymore. The fish is roasted on a fire that's more smoke than flame. And when you finally take a bite, the texture is half ash, half regret. Jesus talks about multiplying fish and bread to feed the thousands. But standing here right now, you're wondering if he could multiply the flavor too. Spoiler, he doesn't. And let's not forget the drinks. In modern life, you roll out of bed and reach for caffeine, coffee, tea, an energy drink, something that convinces your body to keep existing. But here, your drink of choice is water, and not the filtered, ice-cold, bottled variety. No, this is water that's been sitting in a clay jug, warm from the sun, with a taste that lingers somewhere between dirt and disappointment. Some days you get wine, but don't get excited, it's watered down so much that calling it wine feels like an insult to grapes everywhere. As you chew your way through this sacred struggle meal, Jesus uses the moment to launch into a lesson. Man shall not live by bread alone, he says, while you're literally trying to survive on bread alone. Your stomach growls louder than a Roman soldier's trumpet, and you nod, pretending to understand the deep spiritual meaning while secretly praying for someone to invent scrambled eggs. Meanwhile, Peter is talking about how he once caught a fish this big. John is reminding everyone he's the beloved disciple, and Judas is already calculating how much this sad breakfast is worth in silver. By the time you finish, your jaw aches, your throat is dry, and your stomach is still whispering, "Feed me." But there's no time to complain, because Jesus is already on his feet, ready to move, ready to preach, ready to remind you that breakfast isn't about filling your belly, it's about testing your endurance. And trust me, you're already failing. Welcome to the most disappointing meal of your life. And guess what? It's only the beginning of the day. Imagine waking up already tired, choking down a breakfast that tastes like despair, and then realizing you still have to get dressed. Not in comfy sweatpants, not in soft pajamas you can secretly wear to Zoom meetings, but in the most unforgiving uniform the ancient world could throw at you. Welcome to disciple fashion, where the choices are tunic, or surprise, another tunic. Your outfit is a shapeless sack of rough fabric that feels like someone sewed together the leftover scraps of a potato sack and called it holy attire. Forget variety, there's no such thing as, what should I wear today? There is only, which version of itchy linen will ruin my mood the least? And laundry? Absolutely not. Your clothes carry the scent of yesterday's sweat, last week's fish, and the faint aroma of campfire smoke that clings like a second skin. Febreze doesn't exist, but even if it did, it would have surrendered by now. But the true villain of your wardrobe isn't the tunic, it's the sandals. Yes, the famous sandals that grace every Sunday school poster and Bible movie. They look simple, rustic, maybe even charming. Don't be fooled. These are foot traps designed to destroy you slowly. Thin strips of leather dig into your skin until your feet look like they've been in a fight with a cheese grater. The soles are about as protective as a piece of cardboard taped under your heel, and every step feels like a personal argument with the universe. You walk across stones, dust, thorns, and goat droppings, all while pretending you're perfectly fine because, after all, you're following the Son of God. Blisters become your new apostles. They show up faithfully, multiply without invitation, and travel with you everywhere. By the time you've trudged a few miles, your heels are screaming louder than Peter when he saw Jesus walking on water. And here's the fun part. No socks. Just raw skin against leather, baking in the Middle Eastern sun until your feet are equal parts dust, blood, and regret. Congratulations. You're not walking, you're limping for the Lord. Of course, Jesus doesn't seem bothered. He strides along in his own sandals, speaking in parables while you shuffle behind him like a wounded donkey. He talks about lilies of the field, not worrying about clothes, which sounds inspiring until you remember lilies don't have to walk 50 miles with sandals gnawing their ankles. Meanwhile, you're silently wishing for just one day in sneakers. And don't even think about accessories. No hats, no sunglasses, no stylish bag to carry your suffering. Just the same belt holding your tunic in place, and maybe a walking stick if you're fancy. Sun protection? Forget it. By noon, your skin is crispier than the fish you choked down at breakfast, and your tunic sticks to your body like spiritual duct tape. So yes, the holy dress code is simple. Look miserable, feel worse, and keep moving anyway. Your blisters are badges of honor. Your tunic is your personal oven, and your sandals are the chains that tie you to endless dusty roads. Welcome to Disciple Fashion Week. It's brutal, eternal, and never going out of style. There's nothing quite like the sudden panic of realizing you're about to be dragged into a group prayer before you've even had time to wipe the crumbs of stale bread off your tunic. Forget quiet meditation or peaceful silence. This is public spirituality. The kind where everyone can hear how clumsy your words sound and how awkward your voice cracks when you say, Amen. Following Jesus means prayer isn't a private, cozy bedtime ritual. It's a full-on performance, delivered on hillsides, in courtyards, and sometimes in the middle of a crowded street while strangers wonder why a dozen dusty men are chanting toward the sky like they've lost their minds. You try to look serious, folding your hands and bowing your head. But the truth is, your mind is wandering. Did you leave your water jug behind? How long before your feet blister again? And, most importantly, why is Andrew praying so loudly that it sounds like he's trying to out-preach Jesus himself? The pressure is real. One wrong word, and you'll be remembered as that disciple who prayed about breadcrumbs for the rest of the trip. And then there's the length. Modern people complain when prayers last longer than a minute before dinner. Here, prayers stretch on like a desert road. You think you're at the finish line, and then Jesus slips in another parable about sparrows, lilies, or mustard seeds, and suddenly you're standing there nodding like you completely get it, while in reality, you're calculating how many minutes of your life have evaporated. Prayer isn't quick. It's an endurance test, and you are losing. But the real joy? Doing it in public. Imagine kneeling in the dust while kids snicker in the corner, Roman guards eye you with suspicion, and merchants roll their eyes as if you're blocking traffic. Your knees dig into stones, your tunic collects dirt, and your stomach growls loud enough to join the prayer chorus. Jesus says, don't pray like the hypocrites who love to be seen. But let's be honest, you are being seen by everyone, and it feels like stage fright wrapped in religion. Of course, the outcome isn't peace, it's confusion. Did anyone understand the prayer? Did God hear it? Or was he also distracted by how long it dragged on? No one knows. But when the group finally whispers, Amen, you rise with sore knees, dusty palms, and the realization that this will not be the last time you're put on spiritual display. Walking away, you don't feel enlightened, you feel exposed, exhausted, and oddly hungry again. Welcome to the joy of public prayer, where you discover that sometimes the holiest thing isn't the words you say, but simply surviving the moment without collapsing. Picture this. You've barely survived the world's driest breakfast. You're already limping in sandals designed by Satan himself. And just when you think maybe, just maybe, lunch will redeem your day, Jesus drops the bomb. You're fasting. That's right. The holiest part of your journey isn't eating. It's not eating. Modern people complain when they miss their morning latte. Imagine going the entire day with nothing but holy intentions and a stomach that's louder than the crowd at a Roman gladiator match. Fasting sounds spiritual in theory, discipline, focus, connecting with God. In reality, it's you staring at a piece of stale bread like it's a 5-course meal while your insides turn into a percussion section. Your head pounds, your knees wobble, and suddenly you're reconsidering whether holiness is worth the cost of skipping lunch. And the worst part? It's not optional. Jesus doesn't say, if you fast. He says, when you fast. Translation, cancel your meal plans, folks, because hunger is part of the package deal. And fasting isn't quiet suffering either. Everyone notices. Your face looks pale, your eyes glaze over, and you move slower than a donkey dragging a cart uphill. You try to pray, but the only thing in your mind is bread, not the bread of life Jesus keeps preaching about. Actual bread, warm, soft, delicious bread. You fantasize about figs, roasted lamb, maybe even a crumb of cheese, while Jesus keeps talking about storing up treasures in heaven. Right now, you'd settle for a treasure in your stomach. To make matters worse, people around you are watching. If you look too miserable, someone will accuse you of fasting. Like the hypocrites. If you look too cheerful, they'll think you're faking it. There's no winning. You either look like a pious skeleton or a lying glutton. Meanwhile, Judas whispers about money again. Peter pretends he's tougher than everyone else. And John insists fasting makes him feel closer to God, though you're pretty sure he's just delirious from hunger. By mid-afternoon, the real fun begins. Your legs feel like jelly, your mouth like sandpaper, and you're convinced the birds in the sky are mocking you. Every whiff of roasted grain from a nearby house feels like temptation itself. And when you remember that some fasts last days, not hours, you begin to wonder if eternal life is just a nice way of saying eternal hunger. When the fast finally ends, you don't feel enlightened. You feel dizzy, cranky, and ready to inhale whatever scraps you can find. And the great spiritual lesson you walk away with, that fasting is less about holiness and more about surviving long enough to pretend you learned something. Congratulations, you've completed the original cancelled brunch, and your reward is realizing this won't be the last time. Nothing says welcome to the faith like being shoved into a river that looks more like a murky soup than holy water. Forget the sparkling baptism pools you've seen in modern churches with soft music and flower arrangements. This is the ancient version. The Jordan River isn't exactly a crystal clear spa retreat. It's muddy, filled with reeds, and probably carrying more bugs than blessings. And yet, this is where you're told to start your spiritual journey, by holding your nose, closing your eyes, and praying the current doesn't sweep you away before the Spirit shows up. The ritual begins with everyone watching. Yes, everyone. There's no privacy, no quiet corner where you can take a deep breath. You step forward while the crowd whispers. Your tunic clings to you in the humidity, and you try to act confident even though your inner voice is screaming, "This water smells weird." Then the baptizer raises his hand, says a few words, and before you can question your life choices, you're dunked under like yesterday's laundry. And let's be real, it doesn't feel holy. It feels cold. Water rushes up your nose, your ears pop, and for a split second you think, this is it. I've drowned in the name of righteousness. You thrash back up, gasping for air, hair plastered to your face, tunic sticking like wet paper, and instead of looking like a saint, you look like someone who lost a wrestling match with a swamp. Everyone else claps like they've just seen a miracle, but you're pretty sure all they saw was you choking on river water. But here's the kicker. Baptism isn't just a one-time event. It becomes the story people keep bringing up. Remember your baptism? They say, like it was a beautiful moment frozen in glory. No. You remember gagging, slipping on a rock, and emerging with your sandals full of river mud. Spiritual rebirth? More like spiritual humiliation, courtesy of Mother Nature. And don't think about hygiene. Everyone and their donkey uses the same river. Laundry, drinking, bathing. It's all happening upstream. You want to believe this water is cleansing your soul. But in the back of your mind, you're wondering if you've just swallowed 3 different diseases. Holy Spirit, meet holy germs. Still, Jesus did it, John the Baptist did it, and now you've done it. You're officially part of the club. Wet, shivering, and smelling like riverweed, but spiritually initiated. You trudge back to shore, dripping everywhere, knowing this soggy experience is supposed to mark the start of a new life. Every disciple secretly dreams of being front row for a miracle, like they're holding VIP passes to the greatest show on earth. You've heard the rumors, blind men seeing again, lame men walking, demons screaming their way out of strangers like it's an exorcism-themed concert. Sounds exciting, right? Until you realize miracles don't follow a schedule. They happen whenever Jesus feels like it. Which means you're stuck wandering dusty roads, half-starved, and hoping something supernatural happens, just to make all the walking worth it. The crowd around him always grows the moment a miracle seems possible. People swarm like flies on honey, clutching sick relatives, waving babies, dragging their injured friends to the front. You try to stand close, pretending you're on security detail, but in reality you're just as desperate as everyone else. You want to see something mind-blowing, something that makes your sore feet and stale bread diet feel justified. But when the miracle finally comes, here's the painful truth. It's never about you. Jesus touches a stranger, not you. He multiplies food for thousands, but somehow your stomach is still growling. He calms storms while you're still drenched, heals lepers you've never met, and raises a widow's son you didn't even know existed. Every miracle is dramatic, inspiring, history-changing for someone else. Meanwhile, you're in the background like an unpaid extra, clapping along and whispering, "Amen," while trying not to look jealous. And the reactions? They're always over the top. People scream, faint, fall to the ground in tears. You stand there awkwardly, not sure if you should raise your hands, hug a stranger, or just nod politely. Miracles are supposed to strengthen your faith, but honestly, they also highlight how ordinary you feel. You're just one of the sweaty disciples holding baskets, picking up leftovers, and wondering when it's your turn to shine. Spoiler, it isn't. Of course, the pressure builds. Every time you enter a new town, people expect fireworks. Will he heal the sick here? Will he feed us again? Will he walk on water? You stand there like a tour guide with zero control, shrugging while secretly praying, "Please let something happen so these people don't riot." But the truth is, miracles aren't party tricks. They're unpredictable, uncontrollable, and never on your schedule. By the end of the day, you're exhausted. The blind man can see, the deaf girl can hear, the crowd is buzzing, and you're still hungry, still blistered, and still carrying baskets of fish bones. Following Jesus, you've learned that miracles are real, but they're not about you. You're not the star, you're not the headline, and you're definitely not the miracle. You're just the tired witness holding someone else's leftover bread. The invitation sounded inspiring at first. "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." It had a nice poetic ring to it, like you were signing up for a noble quest instead of a grueling internship. You imagined catching souls with ease, walking in glory, maybe even getting your name etched into history. What Jesus forgot to mention was the small detail that being a fisher of men feels exactly like being an ordinary fisherman. Long hours, endless waiting, aching muscles just without the guarantee of actual fish at the end. The work is constant. Cast out hope, pull in rejection. Cast again, pull in confusion. Some days you feel like you're dragging an empty net through the sea of life, and the only thing you catch is another blister. The people you're supposed to fish are stubborn, skeptical, and just as hungry as you are. You throw out words of wisdom, parables about seeds and mustard plants, but half the crowd just stares at you like you've lost your mind. And then you remember you're not even the one telling the parables. You're just the background character nodding along while Jesus does the real work. Physically, the job doesn't get easier. Being a fisher of men doesn't magically erase the fact that you're walking miles on end, dragging your sore feet through dust, your sandals cutting into your heels like they're plotting against you. Your arms ache from carrying baskets, your shoulders burn from hauling water, and your back? It feels like it aged 20 years overnight. Fishing for men might sound spiritual, but in practice it's just another way of saying, prepare to be tired forever. And then there's the awkwardness of recruitment. You're expected to convince people to follow Jesus, but you're not allowed to offer money, food, or even decent housing. Imagine trying to sell the hardest lifestyle imaginable with zero perks. Come join us. You'll starve, walk endlessly, face persecution, and possibly die. But hey, eternal life, right? Not exactly a winning pitch. And yet, somehow, people still join. Probably because Jesus himself has that strange magnetic pull, the kind that makes you forget your own doubts until your stomach reminds you again. The irony hits hard. Real fishermen at least go home with dinner. As a fisher of men, you go home with sore feet, new blisters, and a vague hope that someone, somewhere, understood what just happened. You crawl into your itchy tunic, lie on the hard ground, and think to yourself, was I caught too? Did I just become the fish? Because at this point, it feels less like fishing and more like you're the one tangled in the net. Being a fisher of men isn't glamorous. It's exhausting, confusing, and often thankless, but it's your reality now, casting, waiting, and dragging your blistered body through another day, hoping the catch is worth the pain. There's nothing more nerve-wracking than being invited to a dinner where you're not sure if the main course is going to be actual food or another parable. When Jesus shows up at a feast, you never know what's going to happen. Sometimes it's ordinary bread, olives, a little fish. Other times, he casually turns water into wine, like it's the world's strangest party trick. And you? You're stuck standing in the corner, clutching a cup, pretending you understand the vibe while secretly wondering if this is holy hospitality or divine chaos. Take the famous wedding at Cana. Everyone's having a good time, laughing, dancing, and sipping their wine until the host realizes the wine is gone. Total social disaster. In modern times, that's like running out of Wi-Fi at a family reunion. And just when you think the party's over, Jesus tells the servants to fill jars with water. Big jars. Heavy jars. Guess who gets to help haul them? That's right, you. You drag the stone jars, sweat dripping, back aching, only to find out you've been enlisted in the setup of the most famous miracle cocktail in history. When the water turns to wine, the crowd cheers, the host beams, and suddenly everyone thinks this is the best party ever. Except you know the truth. You did the heavy lifting, and all you got was sore arms and a sip of wine. You had no say in pouring. The miracle gets the headlines, Jesus gets the credit, and you get another blister. Classic. And it's not just weddings. Meals with Jesus always spiral into something unexpected. You sit down hoping for quiet bites of bread, but then he starts talking about how one day his body is the bread, and his blood is the wine. Try swallowing after hearing that. Suddenly, every bite feels like you're part of a metaphor you didn't sign up for. The guests nod thoughtfully while you choke on your dry crust, wondering if anyone else feels as uncomfortable as you do. Then there's the awkward guest list. Pharisees scowl from across the table, tax collectors brag about their coins, and somewhere a leper is coughing into the soup. Jesus loves mixing the crowd, which sounds inclusive but mostly feels like chaos. You're caught between politeness and panic, passing platters to people you were raised to avoid, all while trying not to spill anything on your already questionable tunic. And of course, the dinners never stay peaceful. Someone always asks a loaded question. Jesus responds with a parable, and suddenly the mood shifts from nice meal to theological showdown. By dessert, if dessert even exists, you're drained, stuffed with breadcrumbs, and mentally preparing for another lecture about humility. Dinner with Jesus isn't a feast, it's a gamble. Sometimes you walk away full, sometimes you walk away confused, and sometimes you walk away wishing you'd just eaten alone in the dark. There comes a point in following Jesus when you realize your new favorite word is sorry. Not the quick, casual, oops, my bad, you toss out when you bump into someone, but the deep, heavy, repeated repentance that feels like your soul is on an apology tour that never ends. Every day brings a fresh reminder that you've messed up somehow, thought the wrong thing, said the wrong thing, doubted, complained, maybe even wished for a nap instead of prayer. And the solution? Repent. Again, and again, and again. The process isn't glamorous. You're not kneeling in a candlelit cathedral with a choir humming angelic hymns. You're on dusty ground, knees pressed into pebbles, tunic sticking to your back with sweat, mumbling apologies that sound more desperate than holy. Sometimes it's loud, with public wailing and tears that streak down your dirty face. Other times it's quiet, whispered under your breath as you walk behind the others, hoping Jesus didn't hear your latest grumble about stale bread. Either way, it feels less like spiritual cleansing and more like spiritual groveling. The hardest part? It's never ending. You repent in the morning for your impatience. By noon, you're already repenting for envy. And by evening, you're repenting for secretly wanting to strangle the disciple who snores like a demon. It's a cycle that repeats daily, like your soul has been trapped in an eternal spin cycle of guilt and regret. And no matter how often you apologize, you're never entirely sure it's enough. Public repentance adds another layer of misery. Imagine confessing your failures out loud while your fellow disciples nod along, pretending to sympathize when you know they're just happy it's not their turn. Peter repents for being hot-headed. Thomas repents for doubting. Judas, well, he stays suspiciously quiet. The whole process feels like group therapy without the snacks, a ritual of shame where everyone takes turns proving how unworthy they are. And then there's Jesus himself. He listens patiently, offers forgiveness, and reminds you of grace. It should feel comforting, but sometimes it stings more than it soothes, because if forgiveness is endless, then so is your cycle of messing up. You wonder if repentance is less about getting clean and more about constantly realizing how dirty you still are. By the end of the day, you're exhausted, not just physically, but spiritually. Your words are worn out from repeating sorry. Your heart feels like it's been wrung dry. And your brain can't help but wonder if tomorrow will just bring another list of failures to confess. Spoiler, it will. Repentance, in theory, is freedom. In practice, it's the constant reminder that you're never quite done being wrong. You fall asleep on your cloak, whispering one last apology into the night air, and realize that in this life, sorry isn't a word you say. Occasionally, it's your entire personality. There's no escaping it. When you follow Jesus, every moment is a potential sermon. Forget short, snappy pep talks or little motivational quotes to get you through the day. These teachings go on until you're not sure if you're enlightened or just brain fried. You sit down on a hillside, thinking you might rest your blistered feet, and suddenly, bam, you're in the audience of the longest lecture of your life. The Sermon on the Mount wasn't just a sermon. It was a marathon. Blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the disciples who manage to stay awake through the whole thing. You shift on the rocks digging into your backside, your stomach growling from yet another skipped meal, while Jesus' voice carries on and on about loving your enemies, turning the other cheek, storing treasures in heaven. Important stuff, yes, but after the third hour, your brain feels like stale bread, dry, crumbling, and barely holding together. And it's not like sermons happen on a set schedule. They can break out anytime, anywhere. Walking down the road, sermon. Sitting at dinner, sermon. Stopping to rest in the shade, surprise sermon. You start to live in constant fear of parables. 1 minute, you're talking about fishing. The next, Jesus is comparing the kingdom of heaven to a mustard seed. And you're stuck, nodding along like you understand, while secretly thinking, what does farming have to do with my salvation? The crowds eat it up, of course. They gather from miles away, dragging along sick relatives and children, hanging on every word like it's a feast. Meanwhile, you're sitting there trying not to roll your eyes, because you've heard this one before. In fact, you've heard all of them before at least 3 times. You could probably recite them yourself, but no one's asking. Instead, you're expected to sit, listen, and look inspired, even though the only thing you're inspired to do is nap. And the worst part? The sermons never have an end you can predict. There's no polite, in conclusion, or clear final point. Jesus just stops when he's ready, and you're left guessing if it's over. You start packing your things, thinking the crowd is dismissed, only to realize he's just pausing for dramatic effect before launching into another parable about sheep or coins. Your hope rises and falls more times in one sermon than it does in a whole day of walking. By the time the teaching finally wraps up, your body is sore, your mind is spinning, and you're not even sure what the key lesson was. Forgive? Be humble? Don't worry about food? Great. Except all you can think about is how much your stomach hurts and how far you still have to walk. The constant sermon doesn't feel like divine wisdom. It feels like spiritual endurance training. You don't graduate with a diploma. You don't get notes to study later. You just trudge away, half inspired and half dead inside, preparing for the next time Jesus opens his mouth and the lecture cycle begins again. Spend enough time following Jesus, and you start to wonder if the whole world is possessed. Everywhere you go, someone is rolling on the ground, foaming at the mouth, or screaming with a voice that doesn't sound even remotely human. At first, it's terrifying. You're standing there clutching your walking stick like it might actually help, but after the 10th time, it just feels routine. Wake up, walk, pray, eat stale bread, watch someone's demons get kicked out. Same old, same old. Of course, diagnosing demons isn't exactly straightforward. Some of these so-called possessions look suspiciously like what we'd call bad behavior today. That kid who throws a tantrum in the market, demon. The neighbor who yells at sunrise, demon. The guy who drinks too much wine and starts singing off-key, definitely demon. You start to wonder if you've been living next to possessed people your whole life and just didn't notice. It's hard to tell the difference between spiritual warfare and someone with anger management issues. The exorcisms themselves are wild. Jesus barely lifts a finger, he just says a word, and suddenly the person is free, calm, healed. Meanwhile, You're in the background dodging flying spit and trying not to faint. Every time, the crowd gasps like they've never seen it before, even though it's happened dozens of times already. And you? You're left clapping politely, half impressed and half traumatized, wishing at least one of these encounters came with a warning. The worst part? The smell. No one ever talks about the smell of a demon leaving, but it's real. Sweat, dirt, and something you can't even name, like rotten bread mixed with wet goat hair. You're already nauseous from fasting, and now your stomach flips as the unclean spirit departs dramatically. The people rejoice. The healed person thanks Jesus, and you're standing there gagging into your sleeve. And then there's the paranoia. Once you've seen demons up close, you start wondering if everyone has one lurking inside. That guy coughing in the corner? Demon. The donkey braying too loud? Demon. Your fellow disciple who keeps snoring at night? Demon for sure. You become suspicious of everyone, waiting for the next outburst, the next pair of rolling eyes, the next scream. It keeps you on edge, never fully relaxed, never sure if dinner is going to turn into another exorcism session. By the end of the day, you're exhausted. Jesus makes it look easy, but being a witness to this circus wears you down. You're not the one casting out demons. You're just stuck holding the crowd back, wiping sweat from your forehead, and wondering when life became a non-stop horror story. The truth is, demons may be real, but so is human chaos. And when you're a disciple, you stop trying to tell the difference. Because either way, you're going to lose sleep tonight, wondering if that rustle outside your tent is just the wind, or something darker. The quickest way to realize you're no longer in control of your life is when even your food isn't yours anymore. Following Jesus means everything you own, every coin, every cloak, every crumb of bread suddenly becomes community property. Forget hiding a little snack in your bag for later. The moment you pull it out, 12 pairs of hungry eyes are on you like wolves spotting a rabbit. Congratulations, you've just been volunteered for generosity. It's not that sharing is bad. It's noble, spiritual, the right thing to do. But try convincing yourself of that when you're holding the last piece of dried fish and your stomach feels like it's eating itself. You know the holy choice is to pass it around, but your survival instincts scream, shove it in your mouth now before Peter notices. And of course, Jesus notices everything. One side eye from him and you're already extending your hand, offering your precious morsel to someone who swallows it in 2 bites without so much as a thank you. It doesn't stop at food. Cloaks, sandals, walking sticks if someone needs it, you give it up. Which sounds fine until you're shivering at night because your extra cloak is warming someone else. Or you're hobbling barefoot because your sandals were borrowed indefinitely. You can't even complain, because the moment you do, you're reminded of the time Jesus said, "If someone takes your coat, give them your shirt too." Great advice in theory, miserable in practice when you're standing half naked in the cold. The real kicker comes during meals with crowds. You've barely scraped together enough for yourself, and suddenly Jesus is blessing your tiny stash, breaking it, and handing it out to strangers. The miracle of multiplication looks great in the Gospels, but in the moment, it feels like you've just been robbed by God himself. Everyone else eats, the crowd cheers, and you're left holding an empty basket, wondering why generosity always leaves you hungrier. And don't even think about saving anything for later. Leftovers don't exist in disciple life. If there's a crumb left, it's given away. If there's an extra sip of wine, it's passed around. You start fantasizing about secrecy, hiding a fig under your tunic or stuffing olives in your pouch. But guilt eats at you faster than hunger ever could. Sharing isn't optional, it's demanded. Enforced not by rules, but by the quiet, constant gaze of Jesus that says, "You know what to do." By the end of the day, you're not full, you're not comfortable, and you're definitely not well fed. But you are emptied out of food, of clothes, of pride. Sharing everything sounds holy when written down, but in reality, it's just a slow, daily lesson in watching the last of your bread crust disappear into someone else's mouth. You'd think walking miles in the sun, eating crumbs, and sleeping on rocks would earn you at least the right to complain. But no, apparently even grumbling is off limits. Following Jesus means discovering that silence isn't just golden, it's mandatory. Every time you open your mouth to mutter about your aching feet or empty stomach, You feel his eyes on you, that quiet reminder that complaining makes you sound ungrateful, so you shut your mouth, swallow the frustration, and pretend dusty misery is your new spiritual gift. The problem is, humans are built to complain. It's survival. When your sandals carve new wounds into your skin, when the sun scorches your neck, when your dinner looks like a pigeon could finish it in one peck, you want to say something. Anything. But discipleship twists even the smallest gripe into a moral failing. You're not just whining, you're sinning. And nothing makes hunger worse than guilt riding on top of it. Of course, some of the disciples can't help themselves. Peter blurts things out constantly, blurting frustration as often as he blurts faith. Thomas questions everything, which sounds suspiciously like complaining in disguise. And Judas, well, his concerns about the money bag always have a whiny undertone. The rest of you nod along, half agreeing, half praying Jesus doesn't notice. Spoiler, he always notices. Instead of letting you vent, he tells stories about Israelites in the wilderness grumbling against God, how their complaints led to punishment, even death. Subtle, right? The message is clear. Keep your suffering to yourself, or risk becoming the next cautionary tale. So you practice smiling through clenched teeth, nodding in silence, and pretending your blistered, hungry body is perfectly at peace. But silence doesn't erase the struggle. It just bottles it up. Your jaw aches from biting back words. Your chest feels heavy from holding it all in, and your thoughts spin faster than you can contain them. You don't stop complaining, you just move it inward. The wilderness of your heart becomes louder than your voice ever could, and that silence starts to feel more like suffocation than holiness. Still, you keep it up. Day after day, you train your tongue to stay still, your lips to press shut, your eyes to stay neutral, even when you're dying to scream. Outwardly, you're obedient. Inwardly, you're boiling. And in this strange, forced quiet, you learn a truth no one tells you. Silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just survival dressed up as holiness. There's nothing like being trapped on a rickety boat in the middle of a storm to test how much faith you really have. The sea doesn't care that you're a disciple, chosen to follow the Son of God. The waves rise up like they're personally offended by your existence, crashing into the sides of the boat, soaking your tunic, and leaving you clutching the wood like a terrified child. You tell yourself not to panic, but when water keeps pouring in faster than you can bail it out, panic becomes your only language. What makes it worse is that Jesus always seems unbothered. He's either standing calmly on the deck, like he's auditioning for the role of serenity incarnate, or worse, he's asleep. Asleep. You're screaming, sputtering, and praying for your life while he snores on a cushion like nothing's wrong. It's infuriating. You want to shake him awake and shout, "Do you not see us drowning here?" Instead, you mutter frantic prayers under your breath, half to God, half to your own courage, hoping someone hears. When Jesus finally does wake up, he doesn't panic, doesn't grab a bucket, doesn't even act impressed by the storm. He just tells the waves to calm down, and they actually listen. The sea goes flat, the wind stops, and suddenly the boat rocks in silence. The disciples stare, mouths open, and you're left dripping, shivering, and realizing that once again, faith feels like something he has, and you borrow secondhand. The miracle should fill you with confidence, but instead it leaves you unsettled. Because if he can control the storm that easily, what does that say about your fear, about your weakness, about the way you clung to the boat instead of trusting? You feel small, ashamed, like the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm inside your chest. Faith, it seems, isn't just about believing he can stop the waves, it's about believing he will, even when he hasn't yet. And here's the kicker. Storms don't stop happening. They come again and again, each one demanding you trust a little sooner, a little deeper. But every time the sky darkens, your stomach knots, your hands shake, and you realize you're still not there. You're still the one bailing water, yelling prayers, and waiting for Jesus to step in at the last possible second. When the sea finally settles, the air smells of salt and fear, and the silence feels heavier than the waves ever did. The other disciples whisper about what just happened, about who Jesus really is, while you sit in the corner, wringing out your tunic, wondering if faith is ever something you'll own for yourself, or if it'll always feel borrowed, fragile, and late to arrive. There's nothing more mentally exhausting than trying to decode one of Jesus' parables after a full day of walking, sweating, and starving. You want straight answers, something clear, practical, easy to apply. Instead, you get riddles about seeds, sheep, coins, and vineyards. You sit there nodding along like you understand, but inside your head, it's chaos. Are we farmers now? Shepherds? Am I supposed to be the soil, the seed, or the bird that eats the seed? None of it adds up, especially when your brain is already running on fumes. The crowds always act like they're enlightened. They gasp, whisper, and smile as if they've just uncovered divine secrets. Meanwhile, you're staring blankly at Jesus, waiting for the moment when he explains what any of this actually means. Sometimes he does later, in private, when the crowds are gone. But even then, the explanations feel like more parables stacked on top of the first ones. You nod, smile, and pretend it's clear. But the truth is, half the time you walk away more confused than when you started. And then there's the timing. Why is it always when you're dead tired, covered in dust, and fighting off hunger pangs, that he decides it's time for story hour? Couldn't these lessons wait until after dinner? Or maybe in the morning when your brain isn't melting? Instead, he tells stories about lost sheep while your stomach growls loud enough to scare real sheep away. Every metaphor about vineyards makes you crave grapes. Every parable about banquets makes you think of food you'll never get. And every mention of coins just reminds you that you're broke. Worse, the parables aren't just confusing, they're convicting. It's never just a nice story. There's always a sting in the tail, a hidden lesson that somehow makes you feel guilty. You're not the wise servant. You're the foolish one. Not the faithful soil, but the rocky ground. Not the friend who stayed, but the prodigal who wandered. Listening to a parable is like being handed a mirror you didn't ask for, reflecting back all the ways you fall short. No wonder you're exhausted, you're not just confused, you're called out. And yet, you can't escape them. Everywhere you go, people repeat these parables, twisting them into their own interpretations. One man says the mustard seed means faith. Another insists it's about growth. Another argues it's about patience. By the time they're done debating, you're even less sure of what Jesus originally said. The stories spread like wildfire, but the clarity gets lost in the smoke. When the crowd finally disperses and the night grows quiet, you're left lying on the ground, replaying the words in your mind. You want to believe there's treasure hidden in them, but all you feel is tired, overwhelmed, and secretly wishing Jesus would just say what he means. Parables may hold wisdom, but when your body is worn out and your stomach is empty, they feel less like holy lessons and more like riddles you'll never solve. Nobody warns you just how much of discipleship is done on foot. You think following Jesus will be about miracles, revelations, maybe some dramatic confrontations with Pharisees. And sure, those things happen, but mostly, you walk, miles upon miles, day after day, with sandals that wear thinner than your patience. The road never ends. Hills rise in front of you like cruel jokes, valleys stretch forever, and the dust clings to your skin until you feel more like a loaf of bread than a human being. The first few days, you keep up with excitement. You're energized, thrilled to be part of something bigger than yourself. But soon, the blisters arrive. Your legs ache, your back tightens, your knees creak like old wooden doors. Every step feels like you're dragging your body through punishment disguised as holiness. You try to distract yourself with conversation, but the disciples run out of small talk quickly. After a while, all that's left is the sound of sandals slapping dirt and the occasional donkey braying in the distance. And it's never a straight road. Jesus doesn't take the shortcut, doesn't pick the easy route. He leads you through rough terrain, rocky paths, and places you swear no sane traveler has ever set foot. You wonder if he's testing your endurance or just has a bad sense of direction. Either way, your feet pay the price. Every night you collapse onto the ground, bones aching, wishing for just one night in an actual bed. Instead, you get rocks poking your ribs and the gentle lullaby of someone's loud snoring. The monotony eats at you. Walk, rest, walk, again. The scenery barely changes, just endless stretches of dirt, shrubs, and sky. You start counting steps, stones, even clouds, anything to distract from the ache in your body. And yet, somehow, Jesus walks with ease. His pace is steady, unbothered, like he's not even breaking a sweat. Meanwhile, you're gasping for air, wondering if holiness comes with better lung capacity, and don't expect sympathy. Complain once about your sore feet, and someone reminds you about Israelites wandering 40 years in the wilderness. You can't even win the suffering Olympics, your blisters don't count compared to their desert saga. So you grit your teeth, swallow the complaints, and keep dragging yourself forward, step after painful step. By the time you reach the next town, you're not inspired or enlightened. You're simply relieved to stop moving. Miracles may happen, sermons may be preached, demons may flee, but none of it erases the brutal truth you've learned. Following Jesus isn't about grand moments. It's about endless walking, each mile grinding you down until your faith is tested not in fire, but in sore feet and stubborn endurance. Nothing exposes your lack of holiness faster than being asked to pray out loud in front of everyone. You'd think following Jesus would make you a master of prayer, but most days it feels like a performance you're destined to fail. Kneel here. Lift your hands there. Speak with sincerity, but not too much sincerity, or you'll sound desperate. Say something wise, but not rehearsed. And heaven forbid your stomach growls louder than your words. Public prayer is less about talking to God and more about surviving the judgment of everyone else listening. The Pharisees don't help. They pray with booming voices in the middle of marketplaces, arms raised high, faces tilted just so. It's dramatic, theatrical, designed to impress. You watch them and feel like a child stumbling through a speech, because compared to them, your whispered, "Lord, help me," feels pathetically small. Jesus calls their showmanship hypocrisy, but part of you envies the confidence. At least, they sound like they know what they're doing. Then there's the pressure within the group. The disciples take turns, each trying to sound humble, while secretly hoping their prayer is memorable. Peter blurts out words with passion but no structure. John leans into poetry like he's auditioning for psalms, and Thomas hesitates so much his prayers sound like riddles. When it's your turn, your mind goes blank. You open your mouth, and what comes out feels clumsy, half-formed, and nowhere near as spiritual as you hoped. You finish quickly, cheeks burning, convinced everyone is silently ranking you. The irony is that Jesus constantly emphasizes quiet, secret prayer, the kind no one else hears. Go into your room, shut the door, pray in secret, he says. And yet somehow, life on the road keeps dragging you into group prayer circles, where every word feels exposed. You long for a moment alone, whispering prayers in the dark where no one can judge. But privacy doesn't exist when you share your life with 12 other men who never stop talking, snoring, or asking questions. And prayer isn't just awkward, it's exhausting. Hours on your knees, eyes heavy, body aching, mind drifting. You start with good intentions, but soon you're fighting sleep, head nodding until you nearly faceplant into the dirt. Jesus asks you to stay awake and pray, but your body betrays you every time. You don't feel holy, you feel human, tired, distracted, and guilty. When the amen finally comes, relief washes over you. The crowd disperses, the disciples relax, and you can breathe again. But instead of peace, you're left with the nagging thought that maybe you're not praying right. Maybe your words aren't enough. Maybe your silence is judged more harshly than your stumbling speech. Public prayer doesn't always feel like connecting with God, it feels like failing in front of an audience that never stops listening. There's nothing quite like being told that skipping meals somehow makes you holy. At first, you think fasting will be easy, just miss a meal here and there, pray a little more, and boom, instant spirituality. But reality hits fast. Hunger doesn't whisper politely, it roars. Your stomach twists, growls, and gurgles, so loudly it could double as background music for the Psalms. And the worst part, everyone pretends this is normal. Like starving yourself is the natural pathway to divine wisdom. The first day, you convince yourself it's fine. You'll use the hunger pangs as reminders to pray, just like Jesus said. But prayer doesn't drown out the sound of your body begging for bread. Instead of focusing on God, You end up fantasizing about figs, olives, and roasted fish. Every prayer session turns into a menu planning session in your head. The irony is brutal. Fasting is supposed to draw you closer to heaven, but it only reminds you of how deeply attached you are to earthly food. Then there's the social awkwardness. Fasting isn't supposed to be a performance, but everyone notices when you're not eating. The Pharisees make a show of it, walking around pale and dramatic, their faces twisted in holy agony. You, on the other hand, try to keep it low-key, but your hollow cheeks and glazed eyes give you away. The disciples ask if you're okay. You mutter something about spiritual focus, and they nod like they understand. Secretly, you know they're just glad it's not their turn, and the timing is always terrible. Fasting days somehow align perfectly with days when someone brings out fresh bread or roasted lamb. You sit there, stomach screaming, watching others chew in slow motion, the smell of food tormenting you like a test designed by the devil himself. It's not temptation, it's torture. You start bargaining with God in your head. Surely one fig won't ruin the fast. Maybe a sip of wine? What about just licking the bread? The worst part isn't even the hunger, it's the emptiness that lingers afterward. You expect spiritual fireworks, some grand revelation, maybe even a vision. Instead, you're just dizzy, weak, and cranky. You stumble through prayers, half faint during sermons, and collapse at night with nothing but a hollow stomach and a vague hope that maybe tomorrow you'll feel the holiness you were promised. Still, fasting becomes a rhythm, woven into disciple life. You learn to live with hunger, like it's an unwelcome guest who never leaves. And slowly, painfully, you accept that this holy practice isn't about food at all. It's about surrender, about weakness, about realizing how fragile you truly are. Which is poetic, yes, but poetry doesn't fill your stomach. If you thought discipleship came with some kind of stipend or salary, think again. Following Jesus means embracing the art of being perpetually broke. The money bag, the one Judas guards like it's the crown jewels, never has enough in it. A few coins rattling around, maybe enough for bread, but certainly not enough for comfort. And whenever you think you might finally save a little, it mysteriously disappears into food for crowds, alms for beggars, or some innkeeper who charges triple because he knows you've got no choice. At first, you tell yourself this is freedom. You're detached from the world, no longer enslaved to money, living in faith instead. That's the noble story. The real story is you're constantly worried about what happens when the bag goes empty again. Every night, someone whispers about how much is left. Every morning, someone checks the pouch and frowns. The rhythm is predictable. Money in, money out. Never enough. Always gone. And then there's the humiliation. You enter a marketplace, eyes drawn to figs, dates, or even a piece of soft fabric, only to remember you can't afford anything. Vendors glare at you when you linger too long, clearly aware you're a disciple with empty pockets. Kids run past, clutching sweets you can't buy. Even the beggars look at you like you're competition. You're not just poor, you're the kind of poor that makes other poor people pity you. Jesus, of course, seems unbothered. He talks about sparrows being fed and lilies dressed in beauty, about treasures in heaven that thieves can't steal. Inspiring words. Yes, but hard to swallow when your stomach is gnawing itself and your sandals have holes wide enough to fit rocks. You want to trust, you want to believe, but it's hard to feel heavenly when you're broke on earth. And let's not forget the constant expectation to give. Whatever little you do have isn't really yours, a beggar asks, and you're told to hand it over. A stranger needs help, and you're reminded generosity is the mark of the faithful, which sounds holy until you're watching your last coin slip into someone else's palm while you're left wondering how you'll eat tonight. It's not sacrifice if it feels good, it's sacrifice because it hurts. And oh, it hurts. Over time, you get used to the emptiness. The sound of an almost weightless pouch, the look of vendors turning you away, the ache of longing when you see something you can't have. You stop expecting wealth, stop dreaming of comfort, and learn to live in the constant tension of lack. It doesn't feel glorious, it doesn't feel holy, it feels like scraping by with faith as your only currency. The truth is, the money bag never fills, but somehow, you keep moving. You walk, You eat when you can. You survive another day. And maybe that's the point. Not abundance, not security, just the stubborn lesson that when everything else is empty, faith is supposed to be enough. Nothing stings quite like the moment you realize following Jesus means walking away from your family. You don't just leave your fishing nets, your fields, or your cozy little home. You leave the people who shaped you, fed you, and expected you to carry on the family name. Suddenly, the rhythm of dinners, the comfort of familiar voices, and even the nagging from relatives is gone. What you get instead? Dust, strangers, and a band of disciples who don't exactly feel like family when they're stealing the last piece of bread. The goodbye isn't simple either. You don't sit your parents down, explain calmly, and leave with blessings. No, it's abrupt, messy, and filled with hurt looks. Your mother clutches your arm, asking why you'd abandon everything for a wandering teacher with no house, no job, and no plan. Your father shakes his head, muttering about shame and responsibility. Your siblings glare, certain you've lost your mind. And deep down, you wonder if they're right. The guilt follows you everywhere. Every town you pass, every family you see laughing together over dinner, reminds you of what you gave up. You imagine your brother struggling with extra work on the boat, your sister carrying more than her share of chores, your parents staring at an empty seat where you once sat. You want to believe it's worth it, that trading family ties for spiritual purpose is noble, but noble doesn't erase the ache of absence. Jesus doesn't soften it either. He says things like, "Anyone who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me." Or worse, "Let the dead bury their own dead." It's brutal. A knife through the heart of family loyalty. And while you nod along in public, inside you're torn apart, because obedience to him feels like betrayal to them. And no parable about new family and faith makes the wound disappear. And then there's the strange new family you inherit. Disciples who snore, argue, and get on your nerves. Strangers who suddenly call you brother, but don't even know your name. It's messy, inconsistent, nothing like the home you left behind. You try to adjust, but sometimes the forced closeness feels more like survival than love. You tell yourself it's temporary, that maybe one day you'll return home and they'll understand. But in the quiet moments, lying awake under the stars, the truth presses in. You've burned that bridge. Your life has been rerouted, and the people you love may never see you the same again. Leaving family behind isn't a noble verse on a page. It's the ache that follows you into every prayer, every mile, every night. And no matter how loudly you proclaim faith, the silence of absence lingers louder. Crowds are always exciting if you're not the one stuck in the middle of them. When word spreads that Jesus is nearby, people flood in like a tidal wave, dragging the sick, the blind, the broken, and anyone who so much as sneezed twice in the same day. From a distance, it looks miraculous. Up close, it feels like chaos. Bodies press against you, voices shout over one another, and the air grows thick with desperation. Every hand reaches out, every voice begs, and you're left choking on dust and sweat while trying not to get trampled. For the sick, it's a moment of hope. For you, it's misery. You're shoved aside, stepped on, and used as a human barricade, while everyone claws their way toward Jesus. You try to maintain some order, but it's useless. The sheer weight of need crushes any attempt at control. Mothers cry out for their children. Men drag in friends half-conscious. Lepers stagger forward while people recoil. And in the middle of it all, Jesus calmly lays hands, speaks, and heals. The problem is, miracles don't ease your exhaustion. The more he heals, the bigger the crowd becomes. Hope multiplies faster than bread and fish ever did. People hear the stories and come from miles away, bringing more bodies, more needs, more chaos. You want to celebrate, but all you feel is drained. Each new miracle is another hour on your feet, another shove from the mob, another reminder that your own aches and pains aren't going anywhere. Because here's the bitter truth. While everyone else gets healed, you're still stuck with your blisters, your hunger, your exhaustion. You watch strangers walk away leaping with joy while your legs feel like stone. The lame are dancing, the blind are crying in awe, and you're left wishing someone would lay hands on your aching back or swollen feet. But no disciples don't get miracles. You just get duty. The irony burns. You believe in the power of healing because you see it daily, but you never feel it for yourself. You're the middleman, the extra in someone else's miracle story, the silent witness who smiles while secretly breaking down inside. And that quiet resentment builds. You wonder if faith means constantly watching others find relief while you keep carrying the weight of your own misery. When the crowd finally disperses, when the last healed man thanks Jesus and the dust settles, you collapse. The noise lingers in your ears, the press of hands still imprinted on your skin. Everyone else leaves lighter, freer. You remain heavy, drained, and quietly wondering if being near miracles but never touched by them is the hardest burden of all. Everywhere you go, there's always someone lurking in the background with crossed arms and narrowed eyes. Pharisees, scribes, temple authorities, they trail behind the crowds like shadows, never there for healing or hope, only to criticize. It doesn't matter what Jesus says or does, they're ready to twist it, challenge it, or call it blasphemy. You'd think miracles might win them over, but no. Blind men see, lepers are cleansed, demons flee, and they still find something wrong. It's exhausting, like living under constant surveillance, where every move is judged. The tension is unbearable. The crowds cheer one moment, and the Pharisees whisper the next, planting seeds of doubt. They ask loaded questions designed to trap him, questions that make your stomach clench because you know one wrong answer could mean disaster. You stand there, shifting nervously, praying, he'll say the perfect thing. And somehow, he always does, calm, sharp, unshakable. But just because he wins the debate doesn't mean the hostility disappears. If anything, it grows sharper, more dangerous. What wears you down isn't just their presence, it's the paranoia they create. You start scanning every crowd, looking for the stiff robes, the judgmental stares. You can't relax, can't celebrate, can't even enjoy a miracle without feeling their disapproval hovering like a storm cloud. Even meals aren't safe. Share bread in the wrong way, heal on the wrong day, speak to the wrong person, and suddenly, you've broken a law you didn't even know existed. Their rules are endless, suffocating, and always waiting to catch you off guard. And the worst part? Their whispers start to seep into your own mind. You know Jesus is right, but the constant accusations gnaw at you. Is this blasphemy? Is this rebellion? Are we really offending God? Or just these men? The doubt worms its way into your prayers, leaving you uneasy. You want to believe with all your heart, but when powerful voices call you a fool, a heretic, or worse, it shakes you. Faith feels strong in the moment of a miracle, but fragile in the echo of their accusations. Yet Jesus never flinches. He stares them down, calls them hypocrites, refuses to play their games. His boldness is inspiring, but also terrifying, because you know it paints a bigger target on his back, and by extension, on yours. You feel the hostility brewing, the tension rising, and you can't shake the dread that this won't just end in debates, it will end in blood. When the critics finally retreat, the air doesn't feel lighter. If anything, it feels heavier, thick with the knowledge that enemies don't rest. They wait. And no matter how many miracles you witness, you can't outrun the cold gaze of those who want to see it all destroyed. If you thought following Jesus would give you some quiet time to yourself, think again. Privacy evaporates the moment you join the group. From dawn to dusk, you're surrounded by disciples, by crowds, by strangers who want miracles, and by people who just want to gawk. There's no corner to slip away, no moment to breathe without someone asking for your attention. Even when Jesus retreats to pray alone, you're either chasing after him or being chased by the mob. Personal space simply does not exist. The nights are the worst. You sleep shoulder to shoulder on the ground, pressed against bodies that smell of sweat, dust, and yesterday's fish. Snores echo like thunder. Someone always kicks in their sleep, and your blanket is constantly tugged at by whoever's closest. If you roll over, you bump into Peter. If you stretch, you elbow John. Privacy isn't just gone, it's unimaginable. You've forgotten what it feels like to be alone with your own thoughts. And the crowds make it worse. Everywhere you go, someone follows. They peer into your meals, push into your prayers, hover during your rest. Strangers tug your sleeve, demanding answers, or healing or blessings you don't even have to give. You can't walk 2 steps without someone asking about Jesus, about miracles, about what it's like to follow him. And if you dare to slip away for even a moment, someone notices and calls you out like you've committed a crime. The lack of solitude eats at you. You crave silence, crave the ability to think without interruption, crave the simple luxury of sitting without being watched. But discipleship doesn't allow it. You are always on display, your actions, your words, your faith. You don't just live your life, you perform it for the endless eyes around you. And over time, it wears you down. Even when Jesus does withdraw, sneaking away to a mountain or a quiet garden, someone always finds him. And if they find him, they find you. The disciples stumble into his solitude, the crowds track his footsteps, and suddenly the quiet moment collapses into another sermon, another healing, another miracle. Solitude isn't stolen, it's crushed under the weight of demand. When you finally close your eyes at night, it's not peace you feel, it's exhaustion. The chatter of voices lingers in your head, the press of bodies still imprinted on your skin. You want silence, but all you hear is noise. You want privacy, but all you get is the reminder that once you chose this path, your life stopped being yours. You'd think being one of the 12 would unite you like brothers, but the truth is far less holy. Jealousy runs under the surface like a river, quiet but strong, and it spills out more often than anyone admits. Everyone wants to be closest to Jesus, everyone wants to be noticed, and everyone secretly measures themselves against the others. It's not discipleship, it's competition dressed in spiritual robes. Peter is the loudest, always putting himself forward, always first to speak. Some admire him, others roll their eyes, but either way, he grabs attention like it's his birthright. Then there's John, the beloved disciple, leaning against Jesus with a closeness that makes the rest of you ache with envy. James and John even went so far as to ask for seats at his right and left in glory, sparking outrage from the others who wished they had thought of it first. And Judas, well, he holds the money bag, which gives him a quiet power no one else has. The rest of you shuffle between resentment and insecurity. One day you feel proud to be included. The next, you wonder if you matter at all. When Jesus takes only Peter, James, and John up the mountain, the sting is sharp. You're left behind, wondering why you weren't good enough, why your faith or loyalty didn't earn you a place in those moments. You pretend not to care, but inside, you burn. Arguments break out in whispers and shouts. Who's the greatest? Who's the most faithful? Who will sit closest in the kingdom? The questions swirl constantly, creating cracks in your unity. You all follow the same teacher, but you don't all feel equally valued. And the truth is, you can't help resenting the ones who always seem to be chosen first. Jesus, of course, sees right through it. He stops you mid-argument, pulls a child into the center, and says the greatest among you must become like the least. It's a beautiful teaching, humbling and piercing, but the jealousy doesn't die overnight. The lesson cuts, but the envy lingers, because knowing you shouldn't compete doesn't erase the sting of always being second, third, or last. Jealousy makes the road heavier. Every miracle, every conversation, every private moment between Jesus and another disciple becomes another reminder that maybe you're not as close as you wish you were. You follow faithfully, but part of you aches for recognition that never seems to come. And in the quiet moments, when the arguments die down and everyone drifts to sleep, you're left staring at the stars, wondering if being chosen is enough, when you constantly feel overshadowed. If there's one thing that wears you down faster than hunger or exhaustion, it's the endless list of purity rules. Back home, maybe they made sense. Ritual baths, washing hands, avoiding certain foods, keeping yourself clean for temple life. But on the road, when you're sleeping in fields, eating whatever scraps you can find, and trudging through dust all day, purity rules feel less like holiness and more like punishment. The Pharisees never let you forget it. They glare when you eat without washing. They gasp when you pick grain on the Sabbath. They whisper when you touch the wrong person. They live in constant outrage, as if every bite of bread or brush of a hand is a scandal. And you're You're caught in the middle, trying to honor God while also trying to survive. Washing your hands in ritual water isn't exactly possible when you haven't seen a proper basin in weeks. It's not just about food or hands either. The rules cover everything: who you talk to, where you walk, what you touch. One wrong move, and suddenly you're unclean, cut off, untouchable. You can't even help a bleeding stranger or touch a sick child without worrying you've just broken some law. And yet, Jesus keeps pushing you straight into those situations, healing the very people everyone else avoids. Each act of compassion feels like another scandal in the making. The confusion runs deep. One day, you're told to separate yourself from anything unclean. The next, you're told love overrides every law. You hear Jesus say that what defiles isn't what goes into the body, but what comes out of the heart. It's freeing, yes, but it also flips everything you've ever been taught upside down. Suddenly the lines blur. Are you holy or unholy? Faithful or rebellious? Every step feels like you're walking a tightrope between tradition and this new way. He keeps unveiling, and the guilt never leaves. You can't keep every rule, not when you're dirty, tired, and constantly in motion. So you live with the tension, knowing you've probably broken something, hoping it doesn't matter, and wondering if faith is supposed to feel this messy. Holiness becomes less about cleanliness and more about clinging to the hope that somehow you're not failing as badly as you think. At night, lying in dust with grime still on your hands, you realize purity isn't just about rituals, it's about survival. You can't follow every rule, and maybe you're not meant to, but the weight of centuries of tradition presses hard, leaving you caught between the law you've always known and the freedom you're still too scared to trust. You'd think miracles would solve problems, not create them. But every time Jesus heals someone, it feels less like peace and more like pouring oil on fire. The moment word spreads, the crowd swells, the noise rises, and the chaos begins. What starts as a single healing turns into an avalanche of need, dozens, then hundreds, pressing forward, each one desperate to be next. The miracle is real, yes, but so is the suffocating crush of bodies and the endless demands that follow. Instead of gratitude, miracles often bring suspicion. The Pharisees scoff, calling it blasphemy or trickery. Some accuse Jesus of using demonic power, twisting every good act into a scandal. Others whisper about politics, wondering if he's a threat to Rome. What should be joy becomes debate, criticism, and growing hostility. You watch a lame man leap for the first time in his life, and instead of celebration, the leaders argue about whether it counts since it happened on the Sabbath. The absurdity is enough to make you want to scream. And then there are the people who treat miracles like entertainment. They don't care about faith, don't care about the message, they just want a show. They push forward, hoping to see water turn to wine or bread multiply out of thin air. Their curiosity turns into frenzy, and their frenzy turns into danger. You find yourself shoved to the ground, trampled under feet, praying not for healing but for survival. The aftermath is no easier. Once healed, people rarely stay quiet. They run through towns shouting about what happened, spreading the news faster than you can travel. It sounds good in theory, but in practice, it means no escape. Everywhere you arrive, the crowd is already waiting. Louder, bigger, hungrier than the last. You can't breathe, can't rest, can't find peace. Miracles don't just draw attention, they chain you to endless demand. And while everyone else rejoices, you feel drained. The miracles are beautiful, yes, but they cost you sleep, safety, and sanity. You're caught in the middle of wonder and weariness, of holy power and human chaos. You want to believe every miracle is pure joy, but in reality, each one is a spark that ignites another wave of trouble. At the end of the day, you don't question the miracles themselves, you've seen too much to doubt. What you question is whether anyone really understands them, because to the crowds, they're magic tricks. To the Pharisees, they're threats. And to you, they're just another reminder that peace is always the one thing miracles never bring. There's nothing glamorous about sleeping under the stars when you don't choose it. People romanticize it lying on soft grass, gazing at constellations, drifting into peaceful dreams. Reality? Rocks jabbing your ribs, bugs crawling into your blanket, and the night air cutting so cold it feels like knives against your skin. You toss, you shiver, you swat at mosquitoes, and you wonder why discipleship never came with a promise of proper beds. The ground is unforgiving. No matter how you position yourself, something always digs into your back or shoulder. If you find a spot that feels halfway decent, it only takes one shift for the discomfort to return. By morning, you're not rested, you're stiff, sore, and half convinced the earth itself has a personal grudge against you. And then there's the noise. Nights aren't quiet the way you imagined. Animals rustle in the brush, owls shriek in the dark, and at least one disciple snores like thunder. Every crack of a twig makes you sit up, heart racing, certain it's a thief or wild animal creeping closer. Sleep comes in fragments, never deep, always restless. You wake up more tired than when you closed your eyes. The weather adds its own cruelty. Some nights are freezing, others are sweltering, and sometimes the rain comes without warning, soaking everything you own. Your blanket turns into a soggy rag, your clothes cling to you like icy chains, and there's no firewood dry enough to help. You curl up, teeth chattering, praying for dawn, and wondering if holiness is supposed to feel this miserable. The worst is the vulnerability. Back home, you had walls, doors, and locks. Out here, you have nothing but the thin cover of darkness. You lie exposed, listening to strangers pass by, hoping no one decides a band of broke disciples makes an easy target. Every sound in the night is a reminder that you're defenseless, at the mercy of both nature and man. And yet, this is the routine. Night after night, dust in your hair, rocks under your spine, fear in your chest. You tell yourself it's worth it, that following Jesus demands sacrifice. But in the early hours when sleep refuses to come, it doesn't feel noble. It feels like holy misery. When dawn finally breaks and the sky lightens, you rise groggy, aching, and covered in dirt. The stars may fade beautifully, but you don't admire them, you just breathe relief that another night outside is over. Life on the road isn't just walking, eating, and praying, it's arguing. Constant, relentless, pointless arguing. The disciples bicker like brothers who've been trapped in the same house too long, except the house is a dusty road that stretches for miles. Someone always has an opinion, someone always thinks they're right, and someone else refuses to back down. The debates spiral endlessly, and half the time, you forget what started them in the first place. It's not about small things either, it's about everything. Who's the greatest? Who deserves the seat of honor? Who understands Jesus better? Who failed worst last time? The conversations go in circles until your head spins. And even when Jesus steps in to settle it, the peace doesn't last. His lessons about humility, about serving, about becoming like children sound profound in the moment. But give it an hour, and you're back to the same squabble, as if his words evaporated the second they left his mouth. Peter shouts the loudest, which means he wins most arguments by sheer volume. John appeals to his closeness with Jesus, flashing that beloved card whenever he needs leverage. Thomas questions everything, which drives the rest mad. And Matthew, with his tax collector background, brings up rules and numbers no one else cares about. You try to tune it out, but eventually the noise drags you in. Soon you're defending yourself, raising your voice, adding to the storm you swore you'd avoid. What makes it worse is the pettiness. The arguments don't just fade, they simmer. A sharp word in the morning becomes a grudge that lingers through the day. A muttered insult under someone's breath sparks side glances and cold shoulders for miles. You share food, share blankets, share the road, but sometimes it feels like you're all secretly waiting for someone else to fail so you can feel superior. Jesus keeps reminding you that unity matters, that love should bind you together. But unity feels impossible when egos keep colliding. You want to rise above, but in the heat of an argument, humility feels like weakness and silence feels like defeat. You know better, but knowing doesn't stop you from snapping back when someone questions your faith or mocks your mistakes. By the end of the day, the arguments leave you drained not just from the noise, but from the shame that follows. You replay your words, realizing how quickly you forgot the very lessons you swore to remember. You promised humility, promised patience, promised love, but one sharp comment shattered it all. When night falls and the voices finally quiet, the guilt lingers. You know tomorrow will bring more lessons, more rebukes, and more reminders of how far you still have to go. And deep down, you wonder if discipleship is less about miracles and more about learning how to stop fighting with the very people you're supposed to call brothers. Nothing humbles you faster than being caught in a storm on the water. One moment, the sea is calm, shimmering under the sun, and the next it rises up like a beast, determined to swallow you whole. The wind howls, the waves crash, and suddenly your boat, your only fragile refuge, feels like a toy tossed in a giant's hand. You grab ropes, bail water, shout commands, but deep down, you know none of it matters. The storm is in control, and you're at its mercy. The fear hits fast and hard. Your stomach twists, your throat dries, your hands shake as you cling to the wood. Every wave slams into you, drenching you in icy water, reminding you how close death is. Even the fishermen among you, seasoned and steady, lose their calm. If they're afraid, you know it's serious. And as the boat tilts dangerously, you wonder if this is how it ends, not through persecution, not through betrayal, but drowning in the dark belly of the sea. The panic always collides with the frustration of knowing Jesus is there. Sometimes he's praying, sometimes he's resting, sometimes, unbelievably, he's asleep. As you scream, bail, and tremble, he lies silent, as if the chaos doesn't even exist. Waking him feels desperate, almost insulting, like admitting you don't believe he cares. But when the boat groans under another crashing wave, desperation wins every time. And when he finally speaks calm, steady, unshaken, the storm listens. The wind dies, the waves settle, the sea returns to peace. Relief floods through you, but it comes with something sharper too, shame. Because every time the storm rises, your fear drowns your faith. You forget every miracle, every promise, every lesson. All that's left is raw panic, and it never feels like enough. The quiet after is almost worse. You sit in dripping clothes, breath ragged, heart racing, staring at the still sea that moments ago was trying to kill you. The silence presses in, heavy and accusing. Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? His words cut deeper than the wind ever did. You want to believe, want to trust, but storms have a way of stripping you bare, exposing the weakness you can't hide. And storms don't just happen at sea. Every threat, every crowd turned hostile, every rumor of arrest feels like thunder building on the horizon. You live in constant dread of the next wave, the next crash, the next test of faith. You're sure you'll fail again. When night falls and the waters are still, you try to rest, but the memory of waves lingers in your bones. You know storms will come again, and every time, no matter how many you've survived, the fear never ends quietly. Hunger has a way of stripping faith down to its bones. You can nod along to sermons, marvel at miracles, even whisper prayers with conviction, but when your stomach has been empty for days, belief feels fragile. Walking mile after mile on nothing but a scrap of bread, you start to wonder if following Jesus means living on hope alone. Hope doesn't fill your belly, though. Hope doesn't stop the gnawing ache that wakes you at night and makes you dizzy by midday. Food is always uncertain. Some days a generous villager offers figs or fish, and you eat gratefully. Other days you scavenge whatever can be found: dry crumbs, leftover scraps, bitter herbs pulled from the roadside. More often than not, there's simply not enough for everyone. You sit in circles, breaking pieces so small they barely count as bites, and pretend you're satisfied while your stomach rumbles loud enough for everyone to hear. The irony, of course, is that you've watched Jesus multiply food before. Loaves and fishes fed thousands, baskets overflowed with leftovers. But miracles don't happen every day. And the in-between days are the hardest. You can't demand them, can't predict them, can't rely on them the way you rely on your hunger. You know he could fill your hands in an instant, but most days he doesn't. And the silence of empty hands feels heavier than any sermon about faith. The disciples argue in whispers when supplies run low. Who forgot to buy bread? Who didn't budget the coins? Whose turn was it to plan? Judas insists on protecting the money bag, while the rest mutter about fairness. Tension grows quickly when hunger gnaws at everyone's patience. Even the smallest slight turns into a sharp word, and soon the road feels heavier with resentment than with dust. You try to remind yourself of trust. Do not worry about what you will eat or drink, Jesus said. Sparrows are fed, lilies are clothed, and you're supposed to believe you're worth even more. But sparrows don't look like they're starving, and lilies don't stagger down roads with hollow cheeks. Faith is hard to swallow when your mouth is dry and your stomach is empty. And yet, you keep walking. Each step feels weaker, each prayer quieter, but you walk. Because deep down, you cling to the fragile hope that food will come, that someone will share, that a miracle will appear, that God will not let you collapse completely. Hunger never feels holy, but somehow it becomes the place where faith is tested most. When food finally comes, whether through miracle or mercy, relief floods your body like sunlight after a storm. But even as you eat, a shadow lingers, because you know hunger will return, and with it, the question you can never quite silence. How thin can faith stretch before it breaks? Your feet tell the story long before your mouth does. Blisters harden into calluses, calluses split into raw cracks, and every step becomes a reminder that following Jesus is less about soaring faith and more about dragging sore legs down endless roads. The journey never stops. Town after town, hillside after hillside, dust rising with every footfall, until walking itself feels like a punishment carved into your bones. At first, you thought it would be noble. Walking beside the teacher, listening to parables, sharing in his mission, it sounded like purpose wrapped in motion. But purpose doesn't cushion your souls. After weeks, your sandals wear thin, straps snap, stones embed themselves in your heels, and the noble calling feels like trudging through misery. There's no destination, no final stop, just the relentless rhythm of left foot, right foot, pain, repeat. The landscape blurs together. Fields, rivers, mountains, they all melt into the same exhausting backdrop. You lose track of days, of distances, of how many miles you've covered. One town looks like the next. One road feels identical to the last. The monotony grinds you down until your only measure of time is how badly your feet ache compared to yesterday. The disciples don't make it easier. Some walk ahead, some lag behind, and arguments break out about the best path, the pace, the purpose. You tune them out, eyes fixed on the ground, too tired to care. Even the conversations with Jesus, once electrifying, become harder to focus on when your body screams louder than his words. And then there's the weather. The sun beats down, scorching your skin and drying your throat until your lips crack. When rain comes, it soaks you through, turning the road into slippery muck that sucks at your sandals. Wind howls against you, dust blinds you, cold numbs you. Nature itself seems determined to remind you that faith has no shortcuts, no comfortable rides, only this long grind forward. The worst part isn't even the pain, it's the despair of knowing tomorrow will be the same. You'll wake up stiff, shoulders aching, legs heavy, only to rise and do it all again. There's no promise of rest, no assurance of relief. Just walking, always walking, until the road itself feels endless. And yet, you keep going. Somehow, the misery becomes part of the rhythm. The pain doesn't vanish, but you learn to live with it, to carry it like a second skin. Every step hurts, but every step also brings you closer to something you can't quite name, something beyond the dust, beyond the blisters, beyond the weariness. When night finally falls and you collapse into the dirt, you don't feel victorious. You feel spent, but you whisper a prayer anyway, not of thanks, but of survival, strength for one more day of walking. Trust is supposed to be the glue holding the disciples together, but suspicion has begun to eat at the edges. You live shoulder to shoulder, sharing food, sharing burdens, sharing faith, but deep down, a quiet unease gnaws at you. Not everyone feels loyal, not everyone looks steady, and the terrifying truth is that betrayal won't come from outsiders, it will come from within. The signs are subtle at first. A sharp glance when money is mentioned, a quiet absence during prayers, words muttered under the breath that don't quite sound like faith. You try to ignore it, to believe that brothers in this mission could never turn against each other. But trust frays easily when the stakes are this high, and every disagreement begins to feel like a crack in the foundation. The tension grows heavier whenever Jesus speaks of it. One of you will betray me. His words fall like stones into the silence, and every heart drops with them. You look around the circle, scanning faces you've lived beside for months, and suddenly everyone looks guilty. You wonder if it could be the loudest among you or the quietest, the one closest to him or the one who always lingers at the edge. Paranoia spreads like fire, and no amount of denial can put it out. The worst part is the constant second-guessing of yourself. Could you be the one? Could weakness or fear push you into betrayal without meaning to? You replay your own doubts, your own complaints, your own moments of selfishness, and wonder if faith is really strong enough to hold. If betrayal is born not out of hatred but out of weariness, then every one of you is a suspect. Meals become uneasy, conversations edged with suspicion. Laughter doesn't sound as free, words don't feel as light. Every small mistake becomes a reason for side glances, every absence a reason for whispers. Brotherhood feels thin, fragile, ready to shatter at the first blow. And yet, life goes on. You keep walking, keep eating, keep praying beside men you no longer fully trust. The circle remains, but it feels haunted by the knowledge that one of these familiar hands, one of these familiar voices, will be the one to hand Jesus over. That fear never truly leaves you. It sits with you in silence, follows you on the road, lingers at the edge of every prayer, because the threat isn't outside, it's breathing beside you, breaking bread beside you, pretending to be your brother while sharpening the knife behind your back. It starts as a whisper, a rumor carried on the wind, but soon the air itself feels heavy with dread. The closer you draw to Jerusalem, the clearer it becomes. This road doesn't lead to victory parades or royal thrones. It leads to death. And not just any death, the brutal, humiliating death of crucifixion. The thought clings to you like smoke, seeping into every step, every word, every restless night. Jesus doesn't make it easier. He speaks openly about what's coming: betrayal, arrest, torture, the cross. His voice is calm, but his words are daggers. You don't want to believe him, but you can't deny the rising hostility around you. The Pharisees no longer just glare, they plot. The crowds no longer just question, they turn restless, divided. Rome watches with suspicion, ready to crush any spark of rebellion. It feels like the whole world is closing in, and you're trapped in the center. Fear seeps into the group. Some whisper about fleeing, others try to silence the dread with forced laughter. But no one can ignore it anymore. The danger isn't distant. It's waiting just ahead. Every sound in the night makes you jump. Every stranger's glance feels like a threat. Even meals lose their comfort. The breaking of bread shadowed by the question of who might break loyalty next. The hardest part is watching Jesus walk toward it with steady steps. He doesn't flinch, doesn't avoid, doesn't even try to soften the truth. He knows what's waiting, and still he goes forward. His courage feels like fire, but to you it burns more like guilt. Because deep inside, you're not sure if you'll be able to stand when the shadow finally becomes reality. You want to believe you're strong enough. You want to believe your faith can face crosses and nails. But faith feels smaller when you picture the wood, the hammer, the jeering crowds. Faith feels fragile when the shadow of crucifixion stretches long over your path, and so you keep walking, torn between devotion and dread, between the hope of resurrection and the terror of what must come first. Every step brings you closer, and every step feels heavier. The shadow isn't behind you anymore, it's ahead, waiting, growing darker with every breath. The night air in the garden is heavy, thick with silence, that feels more like dread than peace. You expect gardens to be places of rest, of stillness, of soft breezes carrying the scent of olives and earth. But this night, the garden feels suffocating. Every shadow looks alive, every sound sharpens your nerves. And in the middle of this uneasy stillness, Jesus tells you to pray. Not casually, not politely, but with urgency, with desperation in his voice. Stay awake. Watch with me. Pray that you may not fall into temptation. At first, you nod eagerly. Of course you'll pray. You've seen the weight in his eyes, the trembling in his hands. This isn't just another parable or lesson. This is something darker, heavier. You want to be loyal. You want to prove that your faith isn't fragile. But then you sit down, close your eyes, and the truth slams you. Your body is exhausted. The day's walking, the constant tension, the gnawing hunger, they've all drained you dry. You try to form words, but your thoughts scatter. Your eyelids grow heavy, and before you know it, you're asleep. It's not a gentle rest either. It's the kind of sleep that swallows you whole, pulling you under no matter how badly you fight it. You drift into unconsciousness while the Son of God is sweating drops of blood, a stone's throw away. And when he shakes you awake, his voice heavy with disappointment, the shame cuts deeper than any Pharisee's accusation. Could you not keep watch with me for 1 hour? The sting of those words is unbearable. 1 hour. That's all he asked. Not a lifetime of fasting, not a mountain of sacrifice, just 1 hour of prayer. And you couldn't manage it. You mutter excuses, rubbing your eyes, insisting you'll do better. But your voice sounds hollow even to yourself. You promise loyalty, but your body betrays you. And then it happens again. You try harder, kneeling, whispering prayers, forcing your mind to focus. But fatigue weighs heavier than resolve. Your head droops, your thoughts blur, and once again, sleep claims you. The shame of failure settles deeper, wrapping around your chest like iron chains. By the time he returns, the disappointment in his eyes is too much to bear. You want to sink into the ground, to vanish into the dirt. What haunts you most is knowing this is the hour he needed you most. You've seen him calm storms, feed thousands, silence critics. He never seemed shaken, never seemed weak. But tonight, in this garden, he looks crushed, his spirit pressed down until his very sweat runs red. And you weren't there for him. You weren't awake. You weren't praying. You were asleep, lost in your own weakness, while he bore the weight of the world. The garden becomes a mirror you don't want to face. It shows you the truth you've been avoiding. Your faith isn't as strong as you tell yourself it is. You can follow him across dusty roads. You can shout his name in crowds. You can argue about who's greatest, but when the real test comes, you can't even keep your eyes open. You realize that your loyalty is loud in the daylight but fragile in the night, and it terrifies you to think about what's coming next. If you can't handle 1 hour of prayer, how will you handle betrayal? Arrest? Death? The garden doesn't let you escape that question. It presses it into your bones with every rustle of the trees, every flicker of torchlight approaching in the distance. You want to believe you'll stand firm. You want to believe you'll draw your sword, defend him, prove yourself worthy. But deep down, the fear is louder than your bravado. You know weakness already won tonight, and weakness doesn't stay quiet, it grows. When Judas finally appears, leading soldiers with torches and weapons, the truth hits you like a hammer. This is the moment. This is the hour Jesus warned about, and you're not ready. You swing wildly, cutting where you shouldn't, desperate to prove your courage. But when Jesus rebukes you, telling you to put the sword away, your last illusion of strength crumbles. He submits while you tremble. He stands steady while you collapse inside. The rest happens in a blur. He is seized, bound, led away. The disciples scatter like frightened animals, and you're no exception. You run, heart pounding, shame burning, realizing that your greatest failure wasn't falling asleep. It was failing him when he was taken. All your promises, all your oaths, all your declarations of loyalty, they dissolve into the night air like smoke. And yet, the memory of the garden won't leave you. It follows you with every step, every breath. The weight of your failure presses down, whispering reminders. You couldn't stay awake. You couldn't pray. You couldn't be there when he needed you most. The guilt is unbearable, not just because you failed him, but because you failed yourself. You believed you were stronger. The garden proved you wrong. But somewhere deep in the silence, beneath the crushing shame, a strange truth begins to stir. Maybe the garden wasn't meant to expose your strength, it was meant to reveal your weakness. Because strength built on pride crumbles, but weakness surrendered might still be redeemed. You don't understand it yet, can't see the full picture, but part of you clings to the hope that this failure won't be the end, that somehow, even in the hour of your greatest collapse, there is still a chance for mercy. For now, though, the garden remains your wound. The olive trees stand as witnesses. The stones hold your shame, and the memory of his disappointed voice rings louder than any storm. You failed to stay awake. You failed to pray. You failed him. And as the night closes in, that truth is the heaviest burden you've ever carried. Because sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with swords or words. They're fought in silence, in prayer, in the struggle to stay awake when everything inside you wants to give up. And that's the battle you lost. The courtyard is colder than you expected, though a fire burns nearby. You huddle close, hands stretched toward the flames, but no warmth reaches the icy knot in your chest. Somewhere inside, Jesus stands trial mocked, accused, spat upon. The teacher you followed across dusty roads, the healer who calmed seas and raised the dead, is being treated like a criminal. And you're outside, hiding in the shadows, too afraid to step forward. At first, you try to convince yourself that waiting here is loyalty. You didn't run far like some of the others. You stayed close. But the truth gnaws at you. Closeness without courage isn't loyalty at all. It's fear wearing a mask. And fear has you in its grip, tighter than chains. Then it happens. A servant girl looks at you, really looks at you, and her words cut sharper than a soldier's blade. You were with him, weren't you? Your throat closes, panic flooding your veins. The truth presses against your lips, desperate to break free. But terror slams the door shut. You hear yourself deny it, voice cracking, words spilling faster than thought. I don't know him. The shame hits instantly, but there's no time to dwell. Another person recognizes you, pointing out your accent, the way your voice betrays your origins. Panic rises again, hotter, louder. You deny him once more, each word digging the hole deeper. By the time the third accusation comes, you're no longer whispering, you're swearing, shouting, insisting with desperate fury that you've never known him. The words taste like ash, burning your tongue even as they escape. And then the sound comes. The rooster crows, splitting the night with its sharp, merciless cry. It's just a bird, but to you it feels like thunder from heaven. The memory of Jesus' warning floods back, tearing through your heart. Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. You thought you were stronger. You swore you'd never fall. And yet, here you are, faith shattered, loyalty broken, your voice still echoing with lies. In that moment, you glimpse him. Through the courtyard chaos, through the jeers and blows, his eyes meet yours. He doesn't shout, doesn't curse, doesn't turn away. He only looks. And that look undoes you completely. It's not rage you see in his eyes, but sorrow. Sorrow deeper than any wound. Sorrow that knows you better than you know yourself. Sorrow that sees your denial and still loves you anyway. The weight of it crushes you. You stagger from the courtyard, choking on sobs that tear your chest apart. The night swallows you whole. But there's no escape from the sound of that rooster. No escape from the memory of his gaze. You collapse into the dirt, face in your hands, weeping until your body has nothing left to give. The strong disciple, the bold follower, the one who promised to stand even if everyone else fell, you've become the coward you swore you'd never be. Faith doesn't just feel weak, it feels gone. The words of the prophets, the miracles you witnessed, the promises of the kingdom, all of it feels like smoke slipping through your fingers. If you couldn't stand in a courtyard against a servant girl, how could you ever stand before rulers, soldiers, crosses? Your collapse isn't just failure, it's proof you were never as strong as you pretended. And the shame digs deeper with every thought. The trial continues inside, voices raised, accusations hurled. But you barely hear it. Your own mind is louder, replaying the denials on an endless loop. I don't know him. I don't know him. I don't know him. Each repetition cuts deeper. Each memory of his look twists the knife further. Sleep offers no refuge. Your eyes close only to see his face again. Sorrowful, steady, unforgettable. And yet, even in this pit of despair, a strange truth flickers faintly in the darkness. You remember his words, not just the warning of denial, but the promise that followed. When you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. He knew this would happen. He knew you would collapse. And still he spoke of turning back, of restoration, of purpose beyond failure. It's hard to believe, almost impossible to grasp, but the memory clings to you like a thread of light in a room of shadows. For now, though, the shame is heavier than the hope. You carry it like a stone strapped to your chest, pressing you down with every step. You can't erase the denials, can't undo the rooster's cry, can't forget the sorrow in his eyes. You've collapsed in the trial's shadow, and no promise feels strong enough to lift you yet. The courtyard fades into memory, but its weight never leaves. Every sound of a rooster in the morning makes you flinch. Every fire you sit beside reminds you of that night. Every time you speak, you wonder if the words are true or just another mask of fear. The trial may have condemned him, but your own denial condemned you, and yet buried deep beneath the wreckage something remains. A spark you didn't create, a mercy you don't deserve, a hope you can't kill. The collapse of your faith isn't the end, but tonight, it feels like it is. Tonight, the shadow of the trial swallows everything, and all you can do is weep, waiting to see if dawn will ever bring forgiveness. The night after the denial stretches longer than any you've ever endured. Sleep won't come. Each time you close your eyes, the firelight flashes again. The servant girl's words echo, the rooster crows. You hear your own voice denying him on repeat, each time harsher, louder, more desperate than the last. It doesn't feel like a memory, it feels like a wound that keeps reopening with every breath. You press your hands against your ears, but it doesn't help. The courtyard lives inside your skull now, carved into your mind. Every detail lingers. The crackling of the fire, the murmur of voices, the way your heart thundered as if it would burst through your ribs. You can't escape it, no matter how far you walk into the darkness. The sound of your own betrayal follows you like a ghost. The guilt isn't just heavy, it's suffocating. You once boasted you'd die for him, that even if all others abandoned him, you would stand. You believed it. You built your whole identity on loyalty, courage, unshakable faith, and in one night, in 3 short sentences, it all shattered. You weren't a rock, you were sand crumbling under the smallest wave. That truth burns hotter than any fire in the courtyard. Worse than the guilt is the silence that follows. No thunder from heaven, no earthquake shaking the ground, no instant punishment for your denial, just silence. Somehow that silence feels like judgment in itself, as if heaven turned its face away and left you to rot in your shame. You wonder if you've gone too far, if this failure is unforgivable, if you've cut yourself off forever. And yet, the memory of his eyes won't leave you. That glance through the crowd, that sorrowful gaze, it wasn't rage, wasn't disgust. It was grief, yes, but grief laced with something deeper, something you don't dare name. Mercy, perhaps. Compassion, even in betrayal. It should comfort you, but it breaks you instead. Because you can't understand how he could look at you that way after what you've done. You stagger through the night, legs weak, heart raw, until exhaustion finally drags you down. But rest doesn't heal. Morning light brings no relief. The rooster crows again in the distance, and your chest tightens like a vice. Ordinary sounds now feel like accusations. Every crow, every glance, every whisper around you feels like the world knows your secret. You walk among the others, but you carry a scar no one else can see. News spreads quickly. The trial escalates. The crowds rage. The sentence draws near. You hear the words mockery, condemnation, crucifixion, and your knees nearly buckle. You think of the times you swore to defend him, to stand beside him no matter the cost, and shame sears through you, because now, when he walks toward the cross, you're nowhere to be found. You're hiding, silent, broken, while the one you love bears everything alone. Faith feels hollow in this moment. All the miracles you witnessed, all the sermons you memorized, all the promises you clung to, they crumble under the weight of your denial. You can't bring yourself to pray. You can't even bring yourself to hope. The collapse isn't just in what you did, it's in who you've become. You're no longer a disciple, no longer a follower. You're a deserter with the taste of lies still bitter on your tongue. But even in the depths of shame, a flicker refuses to die. His words echo in the back of your mind, stubborn as ever. When you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. He spoke it as if it were certain, as if your collapse was not the end but part of a greater story. You don't understand it, can't believe it, but you can't shake it either. Could mercy really reach even here, in the wreckage of denial? Could the teacher you betrayed still have a purpose for you? For now, the questions remain unanswered. The trial moves forward, the cross waits ahead, and you are left alone with your failure. You can't change what happened. You can't undo your words. All you can do is carry the weight of them, stumbling beneath the burden of shame that feels heavier than any cross. And yet, buried deep beneath the guilt, a strange truth flickers like a hidden ember. Faith may have collapsed in the shadow of the trial, but collapse is not the same as death. Something remains fragile, trembling, but alive. You can't see where it leads, can't imagine how it could be restored. But if his eyes held sorrow and not condemnation, maybe, just maybe, this isn't the end. For now, though, all you can do is weep. The night may not last forever, but in this hour, it feels endless. And the shadow of your denial stretches longer than any dawn.